The street is alive with the hum of late afternoon traffic, sunlight glinting off windshields as people hurry home from work. On the corner, a group of teenagers laugh, their voices echoing across the sidewalk. Everything feels ordinary until flashing red and blue lights shatter the rhythm. A police cruiser swerves in behind a black sedan, siren blaring for only a moment before cutting off. The driver of the sedan, a tall black man in a pressed suit, signals and pulls to the curb with deliberate calm. He doesn't slam the brakes, he doesn't argue. He does exactly what's expected. But calm isn't what the officer behind the wheel wants. The cop, face tight with hostility, steps out, hand resting on his holster. His voice booms louder than it needs to. Out of the car, now! Pedestrians slow, heads turning. A couple across the street pause mid-step. Phones rise, subtle at first, then openly filming. They know the tone. They've heard it before. The black man opens his door carefully, movement slow, deliberate. His voice is low but steady. "Officer, is there a problem?" "Don't talk!" the cop snaps, grabbing him by the arm before he's fully upright. With sudden force, he shoves the man across the hood of the sedan, pinning him hard against the metal. Gasps ripple from the sidewalk. The man doesn't resist, though his jaw clenches from the pressure. His hands stay visible, palms flat against the car. "License and registration," the officer barks, though there's no chance to comply. His weight presses down, voice dripping with disdain. "Think you can cruise through here like you own the road?" The man says nothing. He doesn't shout. He doesn't beg. He simply breathes, steady and controlled, though the edge of the hood digs painfully into his ribs. Across the street, a teenager whispers, "He didn't do anything." Another raises his phone higher, capturing every second. The officer slams the man harder against the car, anger escalating as if silence itself is defiance. "What's your name, huh? Who do you think you are?" The man finally speaks, voice calm but unshakable. "My name is Colonel David Harris." The words hang in the air, strange, unfamiliar. The officer scoffs, pressing down harder. "Colonel, don't play games with me." But someone in the crowd reacts differently. A young veteran in uniform standing near the bus stop stiffens. His eyes widen, recognition flashing across his face. He whispers the name to himself like it's a secret. "Colonel Harris?" The officer doesn't notice. He's too consumed with power. "You think a title changes anything? Out here, I decide what happens." The veteran at the bus stop steps forward, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. He speaks louder this time, voice carrying across the gathering crowd. "Colonel Harris, sir?" The pinned man turns his head slightly, enough to confirm with a calm nod. Gasps ripple wider now. Soldiers in civilian clothes, off-duty, scattered through the crowd, exchange stunned looks. One by one, they move closer, drawn not just by duty but by loyalty. The officer finally notices the shift, eyes flicking to the crowd. His grip tightens reflexively, as if the man beneath him might slip away now that the truth is out. "Stay back!" he yells at the bystanders. "This is police business." But the crowd doesn't move back. Phones are everywhere now, recording, streaming, and among the faces are men and women who know the weight of the name the officer just dismissed. Colonel David Harris doesn't struggle. His voice remains even, deliberate. "Officer, you're making a mistake," the cop sneers. "The only mistake is thinking your little story matters." But a ripple runs through the crowd. The veteran at the bus stop raises his voice again, stronger this time. "That man is the highest-ranking officer in our unit. He's led soldiers into combat. He's saved lives." Murmurs rise, spreading like fire through the onlookers. "Colonel Harris? No way! That's him?" The officer's grip falters, uncertainty flashing for the first time. He looks down at the man he's pinned, as if seeing him anew, but pride stiffens his jaw, refusing to release the hold. And then, from behind, boots strike pavement in unison. A group of soldiers, still in uniform from a nearby base, emerge from around the corner. They march with deliberate pace, eyes locked on the scene unfolding. The crowd parts instinctively, silence falling like a curtain. The officer straightens slightly, startled by the sudden wall of discipline bearing down on him. But his hand still presses Harris against the hood. The lead soldier stops only feet away, voice ringing with authority. "Officer, release him." The words are not shouted, but they carry a weight that silences even the restless crowd. Colonel Harris breathes slowly, the steel of his discipline never breaking. The officer shifts, caught between pride and the reality that every second is being filmed, every move immortalized. The soldiers stand at attention, eyes locked, their loyalty unshaken. And for the first time since the lights flashed behind his car, Colonel Harris allows himself the faintest smile. The storm has only begun. The street has gone silent except for the pounding echo of boots. The squad of soldiers stops in formation just feet from the police cruiser, their uniforms catching the glow of streetlights. Phones rise higher, recording every second as the tension hangs thick in the air. The officer, hand still pressing Colonel Harris against the hood, glances nervously between the soldiers and the crowd. His voice cracks with forced authority. "Back up! This is an active stop. Interfering will get you arrested." But his words sound hollow. The soldiers do not move. The lead sergeant, a broad man with a steady gaze, steps forward. "That man is Colonel David Harris, our commanding officer. You are assaulting the highest-ranking officer in our unit." Gasps ripple through the bystanders. Whispers multiply. "It's true. Colonel Harris." "That's him," the officer sneers, pride tightening his jaw. "I don't care who he says he is. Out here, he's just another man breaking the law." The sergeant doesn't flinch. He signals with his hand, and as one, the entire squad snaps to attention. Then, in perfect unison, their hands rise to their brows. The salute cuts through the night like a blade. The crowd erupts in shock. Murmurs swell into shouts. Phones shake in trembling hands. "They're saluting him! He's really a colonel!" The officer falters, grip loosening slightly on Harris's shoulder. His face flushes red beneath the flashing lights. He tries to bark over the noise. "Put your hands down, that's an order!" But the soldiers do not obey. Their arms remain locked, salutes sharp and unwavering. Colonel Harris breathes deep, then speaks for the first time since being slammed onto the car. His voice is calm, but each word lands with the weight of command. At ease, the soldiers drop their salutes instantly, but their formation holds. Their presence is now immovable, their loyalty unmistakable. The officer swallows hard, pride battling with reality. "You think your uniform means anything here? This is my jurisdiction, my stop, my call." Colonel Harris slowly straightens, finally pushing himself upright. He turns, facing the officer head-on. The hood of the car has left faint creases in his pressed shirt, but his composure remains untouched. "You made your call," Harris says evenly, "and it was the wrong one." The officer's hand twitches near his holster, but he doesn't draw. The crowd is too large, the cameras too many, the soldiers too still. His authority is crumbling, and he knows it. From the sidewalk, a young veteran in civilian clothes speaks up, voice trembling but loud enough to carry. "That man saved my unit overseas. You don't put hands on him, you don't disrespect him." Others join in. "Let him go! That's a colonel! You're gonna regret this!" The officer spins, shouting at the crowd, "Shut up! Everyone shut up!" But the noise only grows. Anger surging through the bystanders. Phones are live streaming now, comments exploding across social media feeds in real time. The officer isn't just fighting a man anymore, he's fighting the weight of an entire city watching. Harris lifts his hand, signaling silence. His calm spreads through the crowd like a ripple in still water. "Enough," he says firmly. His eyes never leave the officer. "You've embarrassed yourself enough tonight. Walk away." The officer's jaw tightens. "You don't tell me what to." Before he can finish, headlights cut across the block. Another set of vehicles arrives, military this time. A van and a Humvee pull up, tires hissing against the pavement. Higher-ranking officers step out, drawn by the chaos. A lieutenant colonel approaches quickly, eyes darting between Harris and the officer. The moment he recognizes Harris, his posture shifts. He snaps to attention and salutes. "Colonel Harris, sir!" The crowd gasps again. The truth is undeniable now. The police officer stumbles back a step, hand falling away completely from Harris. His face is pale, pride shattered under the weight of rank and respect. Harris doesn't gloat, he doesn't raise his voice, he simply says, "You've made a mistake that will follow you. But tonight I choose calm." He turns to the soldiers, his tone firm. "Stand down. Escort the civilians away safely." "Yes, sir," the sergeant answers, and the squad moves instantly, guiding the crowd back while maintaining order. Phones continue recording, but the energy shifts. What began as a routine stop spiraling into abuse has transformed into a moment of revelation. A decorated officer, humiliated in public, only for his men to arrive and remind the city of who he really is. The disgraced cop stands alone now, chest heaving, eyes darting at the cameras that will immortalize his downfall. He mutters weakly, "This isn't over." But for the first time that night, nobody listens. Colonel Harris adjusts his tie, his posture regal, his discipline unshaken. The calm he radiates cuts deeper than any shout. The night belongs to him now. By morning, Norfolk wasn't buzzing. It was roaring. Every phone, every screen, every corner of the internet carried the same video. A racist cop slamming a black man onto his car, then the revelation that the man was no ordinary driver. He was Colonel David Harris, one of the highest-ranking officers in the region. The footage captured everything. The slam, the arrogance in the cop's voice, the calm in Harris's response, the soldiers marching in unison, saluting their commander in front of the stunned crowd. Within hours, the clip had millions of views. News anchors debated it on live television, their voices tight with urgency. A decorated colonel humiliated on the streets of his own city. A show of discipline that turned the tide in an instant. Comment sections overflowed. Some voices demanded justice. Others, desperate to defend the officer, scrambled for excuses. But the truth was there, in crystal clarity. The officer had abused his authority, and the crowd, the soldiers, the cameras had exposed it. At the rec center where Harris often volunteered, parents and children gathered, buzzing with pride. Naomi, a 10-year-old whose father had served under Harris overseas, tugged at her mother's sleeve. "That's him, Mama! That's the man who helped Dad!" Her mother nodded, eyes damp. "Yes, baby, and now the world knows what kind of man he is." The children looked at the video again and again, whispering not about violence, but about composure, about how Harris didn't yell, didn't strike back, didn't lose himself. His calm became their lesson. But at the police precinct, chaos ruled. The officer, his name now plastered across headlines, sat pale and sweating as superiors interrogated him. "You slammed a colonel to his own car?" the captain barked, slamming a report onto the desk. "While civilians filmed? While soldiers saluted?" The disgraced cop stammered, I didn't know who he was." "That's the problem," the captain snapped. "You didn't care who he was. And now you've turned this department into a circus. Do you realize what kind of firestorm you've lit?" The officer swallowed hard, but the walls were already closing in. His pride, once his weapon, had become his noose. Meanwhile, in homes across the country, veterans watched the footage with quiet fury. Calls began pouring into military hotlines. Former soldiers who had served under Harris spoke out. "He carried us through combat with discipline and honor. To see him treated like that, it's a disgrace." One retired general told reporters, "Colonel Harris represents the best of this nation. His calm under pressure saved countless lives overseas, and it just saved lives again in that parking lot." The narrative was unstoppable. Harris had become a national symbol overnight, not for violence, but for restraint. Back at his modest home, Harris sat at his kitchen table, coffee cooling in his hand as his phone buzzed nonstop. Messages flooded in, from fellow officers, from old comrades, even from strangers across the country. Marcus, his longtime friend and fellow veteran, leaned against the counter with a half-smile. "Well, Colonel, looks like you just went viral." Harris shook his head. "I never wanted attention. All I did was stand calm." "That's exactly why they noticed," Marcus replied. "In a world that screams, silence cuts deeper. Calm makes noise." Harris sighed, setting the coffee down. "They'll twist it, Marcus. Some will call me a hero, others will call me a threat. But the truth is simpler. I just refuse to let chaos win." Outside, neighbors gathered, some holding small American flags, others carrying handmade signs that read, "Respect our Colonel." They weren't there for spectacle. They were there for gratitude. One elderly man, a veteran of Vietnam, told a reporter, "Back in my day, soldiers came home to silence, sometimes even scorn. Today, I saw respect forced back into the open. Colonel Harris didn't demand it, he earned it, just by standing calm." Yet beneath the admiration, danger brewed. In quiet corners of the city, groups whispered bitterly. They made him into a god. He embarrassed the department, he embarrassed us. Their pride twisted into resentment, resentment into plans. Harris hadn't just exposed one bad officer, he had exposed a system, and systems don't forgive humiliation. That evening, Harris opened his leather-bound notebook, the one he'd carried since deployment. His pen scratched across the page. "Chaos tested me yesterday. Pride shoved me down, cameras caught it, soldiers rose. I did not shout, I did not strike, I only stood, and calm stood with me." He paused, then wrote again. But calm does not silence the storm. Calm reveals it, and the storm is here, louder than ever. Closing the notebook, he leaned back in his chair, eyes heavy but steady. Tomorrow, the city would still be divided. Tomorrow, the noise would grow louder. But tomorrow, as always, his choice would remain the same. Because for Colonel David Harris, calm was not weakness. Calm was command. By the next day, Norfolk streets were no longer ordinary. Outside the courthouse, outside the police precinct, outside the rec center where Colonel David Harris had often volunteered, crowds gathered. What began as small clusters of neighbors with homemade signs swelled into waves of protest. On one side, chants rang out, "Respect Harris, respect calm." On the other, counter voices shouted back, "No vigilantes, no heroes above the law." The city, already tense, now teetered on the edge of something greater. The footage of the incident hadn't just gone viral, it had struck a nerve. Veterans arrived draped in their unit jackets. Mothers held their children's hands tighter, whispering that the man in the video was proof dignity still lived. Reporters swarmed every corner, lenses pointed like weapons, ready to broadcast every shout, every tear. Inside the police precinct, the air was toxic. The disgraced officer sat in silence, head low, while commanders barked in frustration. "You've put us all under a microscope," the captain growled. "The department is bleeding credibility. Every call we answer now comes with cameras shoved in our faces." Another officer muttered bitterly, "They're treating that colonel like a saint. What does that make us?" The captain's glare cut him short. "It makes us accountable. Something you all should have remembered before this blew up." The message was clear. Colonel Harris's calm had shifted the balance of power. The badge no longer commanded automatic respect. Respect now had to be earned. At the rec center, Harris tried to maintain normalcy. Children filed in with backpacks and nervous smiles, their parents hovering longer than usual at the door. Naomi clutched her father's hand, whispering, "That's him, Daddy. That's the colonel from the video." Her father nodded, voice low with reverence. "Yes, baby, and he didn't need fists to win, remember that." Harris greeted them with his usual calm, though he could feel the weight of every gaze. The gym echoed with more than basketballs and laughter now. It echoed with expectation. Meanwhile, Marcus paced Harris's living room that night, agitation in every stride. "You see what's happening out there? You've become the banner they're marching under. This isn't about you anymore. It's about everything you represent." "I didn't choose that," Harris said quietly, notebook open on his lap. Marcus leaned closer, voice sharp. "Doesn't matter if you chose it. They chose you. Half the city worships you. The other half wants you gone, and both sides will drag you into the storm whether you like it or not." Harris set his pen down. "Then the only choice left is how I stand in it." Marcus frowned, then slowly nodded. "And you'd better stand like you did that night, calm. Because anything else, and they'll twist you into something you're not." In homes across the country, the video replayed for the 1,000th time. On talk shows, veterans recounted Harris's leadership overseas. One man, voice breaking, said, "He pulled me out of fire when I thought I was done. To see him treated like that, humiliated, it's unbearable. But the way he handled it, that's who he is." Letters poured into the local paper. Some thanked Harris for his example. Others warned that making a man into a myth was dangerous. But all agreed on one truth. The city could not ignore what had happened. Back in Norfolk, the protests grew louder. By nightfall, thousands filled the streets near City Hall. Candles flickered in honor of soldiers. Chants rose for accountability. Banners stretched high into the sky. Then came the confrontation. A smaller group of counter-protesters pushed forward, jeering, their words sharp as knives. Tension snapped like brittle glass. Shouts escalated into shoves. Police formed a shaky line between the sides, trying to prevent the clash. Reporters captured it all. Norfolk on the brink, and then through the chaos, Colonel Harris himself appeared. He hadn't planned to. He had only intended to speak with a few parents nearby, but when the crowd spotted him, a ripple surged outward. Phones lifted, voices hushed, all eyes on him. He stepped into the center of the storm, posture steady, eyes calm. "Enough," he said, his voice carrying above the noise. The shoving stopped. The chants quieted. For a brief, fragile moment, both sides listened. "I'm not your hero," Harris continued. "I'm not your enemy. I'm a man who chose calm when pride and anger tried to take control. That's what you all need to do. Choose calm. Not chants, not fights. Calm." The words cut through like steel. For a heartbeat, the city held its breath. And though anger still simmered, the violence receded. People lowered their fists, candles lifted higher, chants softened into murmurs. The cameras caught it all, the colonel diffusing a city with nothing but his presence, his words. That night, Harris wrote in his notebook, "They gathered, divided, ready to burn. I walked into the fire with calm and calm spread. For a moment they saw. For a moment they understood. But moments don't last forever. The storm will rise again. And when it does, I must stand the same." He closed the book, exhaling long and steady, because calm was no longer just his choice. It had become the city's only hope. By Monday, Norfolk no longer belonged to itself. What had started as a single street incident had grown into something national. Major networks played the footage on repeat. Talk shows debated the meaning of the calm, a nickname coined online overnight. Some called Colonel Harris a beacon of dignity. Others warned he was becoming larger than the system itself. The city felt smaller under the weight of that spotlight. Reporters crowded sidewalks, setting up cameras outside the courthouse, the precinct, even outside Harris's modest home. Neighbors peeked nervously through blinds. For the first time in decades, Norfolk wasn't known for its shipyards. It was known for a colonel who refused to bow to chaos. At the police precinct, tempers burned hotter than ever. Officers filed complaints, claiming morale was collapsing. "We can't do our jobs," one shouted in a heated meeting. "Every stop, every call, cameras in our faces, people asking why we aren't like Harris." The captain slammed a hand on the table. "That's because Harris showed them what accountability looks like, and we failed to do the same. That's on us, not him." But whispers of resentment grew. Pride bruised harder than fists, and some in uniform resented the man who had humbled one of their own so publicly. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, rallies swelled. Veterans lined the steps in full dress uniform, their salutes held high. Families carried photos of loved ones lost in combat, chanting Harris's name as if he embodied them all. On the opposite corner, counter-protesters shouted through megaphones, "One man is not the law. Stop building myths." Clashes simmered dangerously, police lines barely keeping the sides apart. At the rec center, Harris tried to shield the children from the storm outside. Basketballs thudded against the floor, sneakers squeaked, laughter rose, but even here, the noise of chants filtered in through the walls. During a break, Naomi approached timidly, clutching her backpack straps. "Colonel, are you really a hero?" Harris crouched down, looking into her wide eyes. "No, Naomi. I'm a man who stayed calm when someone lost theirs. That's not heroism, it's discipline. But everyone says, they say what they want," he interrupted gently. "But you must learn the truth. Heroes aren't loud. Heroes don't want songs or murals. Heroes are the ones who choose respect, even when no one's watching." She nodded slowly, though the shine of awe in her eyes didn't fade. That evening, Marcus arrived at Harris's home with 2 newspapers under his arm. He tossed them on the table. One headline read, "The Calm, America's Example of Discipline." The other screamed, "Is one man too powerful for the law?" "See this?" Marcus said, jabbing a finger at the pages. "They've made you into a saint and a threat at the same time. That's not balance, David. That's a noose tightening from both ends." Harris took a sip of coffee, unshaken. "I didn't write those words." "No, but they'll bury you with them," Marcus shot back. "You've become bigger than yourself. And when that happens, men either rise to carry it or they break under the weight." Harris looked at his old friend, then at the trident inked under his sleeve. "I didn't ask for this weight, but I've carried heavier." Across town, in a quiet bar, the disgraced officer sat alone. His name was still trending online, his face frozen forever in that humiliating clip. Every whisper, every stare, branded him as the man who slammed a colonel and lost. 2 other men slid into the booth beside him, their voices low. "They made you the villain," one said. "But villains don't have to stay villains. You want respect back? You want the city to remember who runs the streets? Then you don't sit here licking wounds, you stand up." The officer's eyes narrowed, pride flickering to life again. "And what? Go after him?" The other man smiled coldly. "Not just him, what he stands for." That night, Harris sat at his desk, notebook open, pen steady. He wrote, "The city burns in noise. My name shouted as banner, cursed as threat. Neither is truth. I am not their protector. I am not their enemy. I am a mirror. They see calm or they see weakness. They see hope or they see danger. All I did was stand still, and standing still has shaken them more than any strike could." He paused, then underlined one line, "Symbols grow faster than truth." Leaning back, he closed the book. The storm wasn't dying, it was evolving. By morning, fresh murals appeared across Norfolk. Soldiers, painted with sharp lines, saluting under a trident. Beneath them, bold letters read, "Stand calm." For some, it was inspiration. For others, provocation. But for Colonel Harris, it was neither. It was a reminder that his calm, once personal, now belonged to a city that wasn't sure how to live with it. And as the sun rose, he whispered to himself, steady as always, the only easy day was yesterday. By the end of the week, Norfolk was no longer the only city chanting Colonel Harris's name. Across the country, in town squares and on college campuses, people held signs with tridents scrawled in black marker. Protesters shouted, "Stand calm," while others countered with, "No man above the law." The story had leapt from local news to national spotlight. Morning shows invited veterans to speak about Harris's leadership overseas. One Marine told a host, "He saved men who thought they were finished. You don't put that kind of man face first on a car." The audience erupted in applause, but in another studio, a former police union leader bristled. Respecting service is one thing, turning him into a folk hero is another. When crowds salute one man instead of the badge, that's a problem. The debate spiraled endlessly, screens splitting into panels, voices shouting over each other. Harris, once a quiet figure in his neighborhood, had become a lightning rod for a nation hungry for meaning. At the rec center, the children felt the weight of it too. Naomi showed Harris a drawing she had made. Him standing calm with soldiers behind him. "It's you," she said proudly. Harris knelt, studying the paper. "It's good," he said softly. "But remember, Naomi, I don't want you to think calm is about me. It's about you. About choosing control when the world pushes you to anger." She tilted her head, thinking hard. "So, calm is like armor?" He smiled faintly. "Exactly. Stronger than any weapon." The kids nodded, though their eyes still held the spark of myth. He could see it, his image becoming a story larger than the lesson itself. Meanwhile, the police department buckled under scrutiny. The disgraced officer's suspension had done little to quiet outrage. Officers patrolling Norfolk faced jeers and chants, their authority chipped away with every mention of Harris's name. At an emergency meeting, the chief slammed his fist on the table. "This department has lost the public's trust, and we won't get it back by whining about one man. We get it back by changing, by owning our mistakes." Some nodded grimly. Others muttered under their breath. The split inside the precinct mirrored the split outside. Pride against accountability. But Harris wasn't in those rooms. He was at his kitchen table, pen scratching across his notebook. "The storm is no longer local. My name has crossed borders I never intended. People cheer me, people curse me. Neither know me. I am not the noise. I am the silence between it. Calm is not a banner. Calm is a choice." He paused, tapping the page. "But choices ripple, and mine has rippled farther than I can reach." Marcus entered, tossing a newspaper onto the table. The headline read, "The Calm, America's New Symbol of Discipline." "You see this?" Marcus said. "They've turned you into a brand. You can't hide anymore." "I never wanted to hide," Harris replied, "but I never wanted this either." Marcus leaned closer. "Doesn't matter what you want. The country's chosen you. Now you need to decide if you'll stand in that role or let others twist it." Across the city, resentment simmered in shadows. The disgraced officer, humiliated and bitter, met quietly with men who thrived on anger. Their voices were sharp, their pride wounded. "He made you the face of weakness," one hissed, "and the world loves him for it. You want your respect back? Then you hit harder. You remind them the badge doesn't bow." The officer's jaw tightened. He didn't respond, but the fire in his eyes was answer enough. That weekend, thousands gathered downtown Norfolk. Veterans marched in formation, saluting at the courthouse steps. Families carried banners reading, "Respect our Colonel." Counter-protesters waved signs, shouting warnings about military myths overtaking civilian law. Reporters captured every second. Helicopters circled overhead. Norfolk looked less like a city and more like a stage. And then, as if pulled by unseen gravity, the crowd parted. Colonel Harris walked into the square, flanked not by soldiers, but by children from the rec center. Naomi held his hand tightly. The chants wavered, cameras swung, silence fell. Harris raised his voice, steady and calm. I am not your savior. I am not your threat. I am a man who stood calm. That's all. Don't worship me. Don't curse me. Learn from me." His eyes swept across the divided faces. "Calm is not about one man. It's about every one of you. Respect is not given by force. It's lived day by day, choice by choice." For a moment, the storm quieted. The children at his side made the message clear. He wasn't building a myth. He was teaching a lesson. That night, Harris returned home exhausted. He opened his notebook, writing one final line before bed. "Calm cannot be owned. Calm must be shared. And if my story must be told, let it be told as discipline, not legend." By Tuesday morning, Norfolk had become shorthand on every broadcast. Anchors said the city's name the way they once said Selma, Ferguson, or Montgomery, places where one moment cracked open a deeper truth. Colonel David Harris was no longer just a man from Virginia. He was now the face of a national argument. In Washington, D.C., senators sparred on the Senate floor. One declared, "Colonel Harris embodies the discipline and dignity this country should honor." Another fired back, "No man, regardless of service, should be turned into a myth above civilian law." Cable news plastered his image over split screens. Commentators argued late into the night, was Harris a beacon of calm leadership or proof of dangerous hero worship? And in Norfolk, Harris sat at his kitchen table, the noise pouring from his muted television, his notebook open. The words filled pages, but the storm outside only grew louder. At the rec center, the pressure seeped through the walls. Parents hovered longer at drop-off, voices hushed. Naomi's father pulled Harris aside. "They're saying your name in Congress," he said, shaking his head. That stop wasn't just Norfolk anymore, it's the whole country. Harris looked him in the eye, calm but tired. "And what does the country see?" The man shrugged. "Depends who you ask. Some see dignity, others see defiance, but none of them see the man I know, the one who teaches our kids discipline." Harris nodded slowly. "That's the cost of stories. They grow until they don't fit the truth." Meanwhile, resentment hardened elsewhere. In the precinct, younger officers whispered bitterly in corners. "He's making us look weak," one muttered. "Every protester out there calls his name instead of ours." An older sergeant tried to quiet them. "He didn't make us look weak. You did, when you let pride take over." But the bitterness only deepened. Pride wounded is more dangerous than pride untested. And somewhere in those whispers, plans began to form. National media descended on Norfolk like a tidal wave. News vans clogged streets. Reporters shoved microphones at anyone with a connection to Harris. One mother, holding her toddler, told a camera, "He's the only one I trust to walk these streets calm." A critic countered, "This city is losing control. One man can't become bigger than the law. That's not respect, that's chaos." The footage ran side by side on evening broadcasts, fueling division that stretched from Norfolk to New York, from Virginia to California. Marcus saw it coming before Harris admitted it. Sitting across from him in the dim living room, he said, "They're going to drag you to D.C. next. Hearings, testimony, maybe even parades." "I want none of that," Harris said firmly. "Doesn't matter, the machine's rolling. You've become a symbol whether you want it or not. And the country doesn't let symbols rest. They put them on pedestals or they burn them down." Harris leaned back, silent for a long moment. Finally he murmured, "Then I'll stand where I always stand. Calm. Let them decide what they see." But the city's streets weren't calm. That Friday, thousands filled downtown Norfolk again, chanting until their throats were raw. Veterans held American flags high. Families carried portraits of fallen soldiers. Counter-protesters raised signs accusing Harris of undermining the badge. Police lines strained as arguments flared. Someone threw a bottle. Another shoved. The clash teetered on the edge of violence. Then, Agis-san, like before, a ripple passed through the crowd. Colonel Harris stepped into the square, posture steady, eyes calm. Cameras swung toward him instantly. He raised his voice just enough to carry. "Look around you. You've turned my name into noise. But calm isn't noise, it's choice. Not a chant, not a banner, a choice. Yours." The shouting dimmed, replaced by murmurs. He pointed toward the children standing near the steps. "They don't need your noise, they need your example. If you want respect, show it. If you want peace, live it. Don't look to me, look to yourselves." For a moment, silence stretched across the square, heavy but healing. That night, Harris wrote in his notebook, "The Capitol watches me, the nation debates me. But the truth is the same. It was never about me. It was about control when anger demanded surrender. Calm isn't mine to own. It belongs to anyone who chooses it. Yet the louder they shout my name, the more they forget the lesson. He paused, pressing the pen harder. Symbols are dangerous. They inspire. They divide. And sometimes they consume the man inside them. I must not let that happen. On the television behind him, pundits bickered louder, headlines screamed bolder, and the storm swirled higher. But at the center, Harris sat steady, breathing slow. Because no matter how loud the world grew, his truth remained the same. Calm endures. The letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, slid quietly under Colonel Harris's door in a plain envelope. No flashy seals, no thick packet, just one page stamped with the insignia of the United States Congress. Colonel David Harris is requested to appear before the House Committee on Public Safety and Accountability. Requested was the word, but everyone knew the truth. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. Harris sat at his kitchen table, staring at the paper while the television in the corner replayed footage of Norfolk's latest protests. Crowds filled downtown again, chants rising, counter-chants colliding, signs shaking in the air. His name was everywhere, louder than ever. Marcus read the letter over his shoulder, whistling low. "Well, there it is. DC wants their piece of you." "I don't want to be their piece," Harris murmured. "You don't get a choice," Marcus replied. "Symbols don't get choices. They get stages." At the rec center, the kids noticed the strain in his face, even though he tried to hide it. Naomi tugged at his sleeve. "Colonel, are you leaving?" He crouched, smiling faintly. "Not leaving, just visiting some people who want to hear me speak." "Like the news people?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "Something like that." Her father, standing nearby, met Harris's eyes. "You're walking into a hornet's nest, but maybe it's what the country needs. A reminder that calm isn't weakness." Harris nodded, though inside he felt the weight pressing heavier than ever. Meanwhile, in Norfolk's police precinct, bitterness boiled hotter. Officers grumbled openly now, some accusing Harris of undermining their authority. One slammed his locker shut. "You see the headlines? Congress calls him in like he's running the show. What about us? What about the men actually keeping the streets safe?" Another replied under his breath, "Safe or humiliated?" He showed the world what happens when pride runs the badge instead of respect. The room split down the middle, tension gnawing at the force. That night, Harris prepared his uniform. Not the pressed suit he had worn in courtrooms before, not the casual clothes of the rec center. His full dress blues, every ribbon and bar polished until they gleamed. Marcus watched quietly. "You know they'll twist whatever you say, right? Half will use you as proof. The other half will try to bury you with your own words." Harris fastened his jacket. "Then I'll give them nothing to twist. I'll speak the truth. Calm, nothing more." The trip to DC was a blur of flashing cameras and endless noise. Reporters swarmed at Union Station shouting questions. "Colonel, do you see yourself as a hero? Do you undermine civilian authority? Are you building a movement?" Harris didn't flinch. He walked steadily through the gauntlet, his silence saying more than any answer could. Inside the Capitol, the committee chamber overflowed. Senators, representatives, aides, reporters, every seat filled, every lens pointed at him. The chair banged the gavel. "This hearing is now in session. Colonel Harris, please state your name and rank for the record." Harris rose, his voice even, clear. "Colonel David Harris, United States Army." The questioning came fast, sharp. One congressman leaned forward. "Colonel, do you consider yourself above the law because of your rank?" "No," Harris replied calmly. "Rank doesn't place me above law. Discipline places me within it." Another pressed. "Do you realize your actions have sparked protests, disrupted policing, and created division across the nation?" "I realize my calm exposed pride," Harris answered. "Division was already there. Cameras simply revealed it." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Some nodded, others frowned, scribbling furiously. A congresswoman spoke next. "Colonel, the people are chanting your name in the streets. Do you see yourself as a leader of this movement?" "I am not a leader of a movement," Harris said firmly. "I am a mirror. People see in me what they carry themselves, discipline or fear, respect or pride. I did not create their reflection." The room hushed. Outside, protests swelled even larger, broadcast live across every network. Veterans saluted in front of barricades, Counter-protesters shouted accusations, signs waved above a sea of cameras. Inside, the committee room bristled. Some lawmakers looked shaken by Harris's words, others bristled with frustration, but none could deny the discipline radiating from him. That evening, after the hearing adjourned, Harris returned to his hotel. He opened his notebook, pen steady. Today the Capitol asked if I was a hero, a leader, a threat. I told them I am none of those things. I am calm. Calm is not law, but it does not break law. Calm is not power, but it defeats pride. Calm is not myth, but it becomes myth when noise refuses to listen. He underlined the last line twice. Closing the book, he stared out at the Capitol dome glowing in the night. The nation had seen him. The storm had grown. And tomorrow it would be louder still. The train back to Norfolk was quieter than the one that had carried Harris to Washington. Outside the window, towns blurred into streaks of gray, but inside the carriage the silence felt heavy. Harris sat upright in his dress blues, his ribbons catching faint light. Reporters had tried to board, but he declined interviews, and now the only sounds were the click of the rails and the scratch of his pen across his notebook. They asked me if I was above the law. I told them no. They asked if I was leading a movement. I told them no. But still they will write their own answers. The truth is simple. Calm is not rebellion. Calm is responsibility. He paused, staring out at the darkening horizon. But responsibility is a burden that grows heavier every mile I travel home. When the train arrived, Norfolk wasn't quiet. Crowds pressed against barricades, waving signs, chanting his name. Some held banners painted with tridents, others shouted slogans like "Respect Calm." Police officers, weary and tense, tried to control the tide as cameras flashed relentlessly. Harris stepped onto the platform, the weight of dozens of lenses immediately on him. Marcus was there, waiting by the gate, expression sharp. "Welcome home," he muttered. "Looks like the circus came with you." Harris adjusted his bag. "The circus was already here. I just gave them something to shout at." Marcus shook his head. "You gave them something to believe in, whether you wanted to or not." Back at the rec center, the children swarmed him. Naomi ran forward, clutching his sleeve. "Colonel, we saw you on TV. You told them calm is responsibility. That's what you tell us too." He knelt, meeting her wide eyes. "That's right, Naomi, and I meant it. It's not about crowds or cameras. It's about how you live when no one is watching." The kids nodded, though their eyes still glittered with the awe of seeing their coach on national screens. Harris felt a pang of worry. The myth was growing faster than the lesson. Meanwhile, the city itself strained under the spotlight. Protests swelled outside City Hall. Veterans in uniform lined the steps, chanting for accountability. Counter-protesters shouted back, claiming Harris was undermining police. Businesses near downtown shuttered early, afraid of being caught in the middle. At the precinct, resentment hardened. Officers muttered in locker rooms, some furious at the humiliation, others quietly admitting the colonel's words had forced them to see the badge differently. The divide inside the force mirrored the divide in the streets, and in a bar across town, the disgraced officer nursed a drink, face hidden under a cap. His name still trended online, his career in ruins. Around him, bitter voices whispered, "He made you the villain. You want it back, you hit harder." You remind them the badge doesn't bow to a uniform, no matter how many ribbons it wears. The officer's silence was an answer in itself. That night, Marcus sat across from Harris at the kitchen table, television muted but flashing images of protests and news panels. "You realize what's happening, don't you?" Marcus said. "The city's splitting down the middle, half chant for you, half curse you, and every time you open your mouth, it only feeds the fire." Harris rubbed his temples. "I can't be silent, Marcus. Silence lets them write lies. Words are all I have left." Marcus leaned forward. "Then choose carefully, because the next time you speak, it won't just be Norfolk listening. It'll be the whole country deciding whether you're a savior or a threat." The following morning, Harris walked to the rec center. Reporters trailed him, microphones thrust forward. "Colonel, do you accept being called the calm? Do you plan to run for office? Do you think the police are corrupt?" He didn't break stride. His silence was his shield. Inside, the gym felt like a refuge. The bounce of basketballs, the squeak of sneakers, the laughter of children, it was the one place the noise hadn't fully invaded. He gathered the kids, speaking low but steady. "Don't let anyone tell you calm is weakness. Don't let anyone tell you respect is surrender. Strength isn't in shouts, it's in control. Remember that." Always. The children listened, their small faces serious, their eyes full of belief. That evening, Harris wrote again in his notebook, "Home is louder than Washington. Protests outside, cameras at the gates, whispers in every corner. They call me hero. They call me danger. But both miss the truth. Calm is not glory. Calm is not rebellion. Calm is choice. And choice is the one thing no one can take from me." He set the pen down, exhaling slowly. Outside his window, chants echoed through the night. Supporters cheered his name. Critics shouted curses. Norfolk was split wide open, and in the shadows, men with bruised pride whispered plans of their own. The storm was not over. It was only gathering strength. Norfolk's downtown square hadn't seen this many people in decades. By Friday evening, thousands pressed shoulder to shoulder, waving banners, chanting slogans that clashed in the humid air. One side shouted, "Respect the colonel! Stand calm!" The other screamed back, "No myths above the law!" The police had barricades set up, but the barricades looked flimsy against the sea of bodies. Officers sweated in their vests, some gripping batons tighter than necessary, others scanning nervously, knowing every move was being filmed by hundreds of phones. From above, helicopters hovered, their spotlights cutting across the crowd like accusing fingers. National networks broadcast the scene live, anchors speaking breathlessly about Norfolk being on the brink. And in the middle of it all, one name echoed louder than the sirens. "Harris! Harris! Harris!" Colonel David Harris stood blocks away, inside the rec center gym where children dribbled basketballs to drown out the noise. Naomi ran up to him, fear flickering in her young eyes. "Coach, they're chanting your name outside. Why are they so angry?" He knelt, brushing a hand across her shoulder. "Because anger is easy, Naomi. Calm is harder, and some people don't want to do the hard work." "But you'll fix it, right?" she asked. His chest tightened. She didn't see a man, she saw a promise. He nodded gently. "I'll do my best." Meanwhile, in the precinct, the bitterness had boiled over. The disgraced officer sat in a back office, silent, while others muttered in corners. One slammed his fist on a desk. "The city's not chanting our names anymore. They're chanting his. Do you know what that does to us?" Another officer muttered, "Maybe we should have earned their respect instead of demanding it." The room split again, half drowning in pride, half haunted by guilt. But all of them knew the truth. Harris's calm had exposed something larger than one stop, and not everyone was ready to face it. By sundown, the protest turned volatile. A bottle flew from one side, shattering against the pavement near the police line. Shouts escalated, fists clenched, the air thick with the promise of violence. "Hold the line," an officer barked, but fear crackled like static in the air. Reporters captured every second, broadcasting it to millions. On screens across America, Norfolk looked like a city about to implode. Marcus found Harris pacing the edge of the rec center, his jaw tight. "You can't keep hiding in here," Marcus said. "They're ready to tear each other apart out there." Harris shook his head. "I'm not a savior. I'm not their judge. I'm a man who chose calm once, and they turned it into fire." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but fire can burn a city down, or it can be contained. If you don't step into it, someone else will. And they might not carry calm the way you do." Harris looked toward the muffled chants echoing through the gym walls. His notebook sat in his hand, pages filled with quiet truths that now seemed like whispers against the roar outside. He closed it firmly. "Then I'll step in, not to lead them, not to silence them, but to remind them." As night fell, Harris walked into the square. Cameras swung instantly. Chants spiked into a frenzy. Supporters screamed his name, counter-protesters cursed louder, police tensed as the barrier swayed. Harris raised his hand, and the noise faltered. The crowd, caught off guard by his presence, leaned in. Helicopter spotlights fixed on him, casting his shadow long across the pavement. "I am not your banner," he said, his voice carrying without a microphone. "I am not your chant. I am not your enemy. I am not your hero." He paused, scanning the divided sea of faces. "I am a man who chose calm when pride demanded anger. That is all. And every one of you has the same choice. Right now, tonight. You can choose anger, you can choose fear, or you can choose calm." The words hung heavy, rolling through the silence. From the front lines, a counter-protester shouted, "Why should we listen to you?" Harris's gaze didn't waver. "Don't listen to me. Listen to yourselves. Ask what happens if you keep shouting, if you keep striking. Who wins when fear rules you? Who loses when pride controls you? Look at your children. Look at your neighbors. Choose for them, not for me. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Supporters lowered their banners. Counter-protesters shifted uneasily. Even the police line relaxed slightly, batons lowering. Marcus stood at the edge, watching. He whispered to himself, "You're doing it again, brother. You're turning fire into silence." And for a fragile moment, the storm bent. That night, back home, Harris opened his notebook. The city almost burned tonight. Noise roared, pride demanded chaos. But calm stood, and calm spread. Not enough to end the storm, but enough to pause it. Enough to remind them the choice is theirs, not mine. He underlined a final line. Calm is not victory. Calm is survival. And survival is the first step toward peace. Outside his window, the chance had faded, but he knew they would rise again. Because storms never vanish in one night. They gather, retreat, and gather again. And he would have to stand calm, no matter how many times. Norfolk awoke uneasy. The streets were quieter after the near clash downtown, but quiet didn't mean peace, it meant tension pushed underground, waiting to erupt again. Colonel Harris walked through the neighborhood early that morning. Uniform jacket traded for a simple gray sweatshirt. People greeted him with nods and cautious smiles. Some whispered prayers under their breath as he passed, as if his presence alone carried safety. Others avoided his eyes, muttering that one man shouldn't hold so much sway. He returned home to find Marcus waiting on the porch, newspaper in hand. The headline blared, "The calm quells Norfolk's riot, for now." Marcus sighed. "They make it sound like you waved a magic wand, but we both know the fire's still burning." Harris sat down, his gaze steady. Fires burn longest when you can't see the smoke. Across town in a dimly lit bar, the disgraced officer sat hunched over a glass. The humiliation of that night replayed endlessly in his mind. Harris's calm face, the soldier's salute, the cameras immortalizing every second. Two men slid into the booth across from him. Their voices were low, their eyes sharp. "You want your respect back?" one asked. The officer didn't answer. His silence was enough. The second leaned forward. "Then stop sulking. Harris made you look weak, but weakness can be turned around. You know the streets. We know the crews. Together is we can remind the city who holds power." The disgraced officer narrowed his eyes. "You're talking about gangs." The man smirked. "I'm talking about pride. The gangs hate him as much as you do. To them, he's a myth, and myths are meant to be broken." The officer swirled his drink, pride and bitterness swirling with it. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a small nod. At the rec center, Harris noticed the shift among the kids. They laughed and played, but their questions cut deeper. "Colonel, are you going to stop the next fight too?" one asked. "Coach, why do they call you the calm on the news?" another chimed in. Naomi, more serious than the others, asked softly, "What happens if someone doesn't listen to calm?" Harris crouched, speaking so they all heard. "Then you still choose it. Calm isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself, even if the world around you refuses." They nodded, though their eyes still carried the awe of children who believed their coach could stop storms with a word. Harris knew the danger of that belief. Myths inspire, but they also blind. That evening, Marcus and Harris sat at the kitchen table again. Marcus leaned in, voice low. "Word is, gangs are stirring harder. And they're not alone. That officer, the one who put you on the car, he's been seen with people he shouldn't be seen with." Harris's jaw tightened. "Pride unites strange allies." "Yeah," Marcus said, "and pride makes them reckless. They're planning something. You can feel it in the streets." Harris tapped his pen against the open notebook. "Then I'll be ready. Not with fists, with calm." Marcus shook his head, half frustrated, half admiring. "Sometimes I think calm's the only thing keeping the city from collapsing. And sometimes I wonder if calm will be enough." Meanwhile, in basements and back alleys, gangs sharpened their anger. The video of Harris standing calm while armed men folded had humiliated them all. Their leaders spoke with venom. "He made us look weak. The streets laugh at us now. That ends." The disgraced officer's voice cut through the smoke. "Then don't just fight him. Break him in front of everyone. Hit him where it matters. Make the whole city see his calm crack." The plan began to take shape. Not just fists, not just noise, something bigger, something public. A storm designed not only to hurt Harris, but to shatter the legend of the calm itself. Back at his home, Harris wrote in his notebook late into the night, The city holds its breath. Pride hunts in the shadows, whispering, plotting. They want me to break. They want proof that calm fails when the storm grows loud enough. But calm is not the absence of storms. It is standing in them, unbroken. He paused, pressing the pen harder. If they come, they will find me the same. Calm does not yield to pride. Calm does not bow to fear. Calm endures. He closed the book, exhaling slowly. Outside, the chants had faded for the night, replaced by the quiet hum of a city pretending to sleep. But Harris knew the truth. Norfolk wasn't resting. Norfolk was bracing, and so was he. The next week began with an uneasy calm. Norfolk's streets were quieter than they had been in days, but the quiet felt staged, like a curtain hiding chaos just behind it. People still whispered Harris's name at markets and bus stops. Children still pointed to the murals painted on brick walls. And yet, there was a tension in the air, an electricity that made even the most ordinary errands feel like walking through a storm about to break. Colonel David Harris sensed it the moment he stepped out of his house. The neighborhood greeted him warmly, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes. An old woman pressed his hand and whispered, "Be careful, son. They're waiting." He nodded politely, but her words followed him down the street. Across town, in a smoky basement, the whispers had taken form. The disgraced officer sat at a table with 3 gang leaders, their tattoos stark under the dim light. Pride burned in every glance. "He humiliated me," the officer said, his voice low, bitter. "And he humiliated all of you. The city thinks he can't be touched. That ends now." One gang leader leaned back, smirking. "You want him gone? We've tried fists, we've tried noise. Didn't work. He stands too still." Another slammed a fist on the table. "Then we don't go at him alone. We go at him big, loud, public. Break him in front of the city that worships him." The officer nodded. "We hit the rec center. That's where he thinks he's strongest. We'll turn his sanctuary into chaos." The men murmured agreement. The plan was reckless, but pride rarely breeds patience. At the rec center that same afternoon, Harris watched the children run drills, the thud of basketballs echoing across the gym. He noticed their laughter was louder than usual, forced almost, as if they too felt the tension pressing outside. During a break, Naomi lingered near him. "Colonel," she whispered, "is it true people want to hurt you?" He crouched to her level, steady and calm. "There are always people who fear calm, Naomi. They think noise makes them strong. But remember what I told you. Strength is control." Her small hand gripped his. "Then promise me you'll stay calm." "I promise," he said, and meant it. Marcus arrived later, his face grim. "Word on the street says something's brewing. Crews that never worked together before are meeting. And that officer? He's in the middle of it. He's not done, David. He wants his pride back." Harris closed the gym doors behind the last of the children. "Pride doesn't bring back respect. It only digs the hole deeper." "Yeah," Marcus said, "but desperate men don't think straight. If they come for you at the rec center, you'll have kids in the crossfire." Harris's jaw tightened. "Then I'll be ready. Calm doesn't mean unprepared." That night, Harris sat at his desk, notebook open, pen steady. The storm gathers in silence. Pride unites those who should be enemies. They think calm is a wall they can topple if they hit hard enough. But calm is not a wall. It is the ground beneath them. They will strike, and they will fall, because noise cannot stand without balance. He underlined the final line twice. The following evening, the trap began. Cars cruised slowly past the rec center, engines idling too long. Teenagers with unfamiliar faces loitered across the street, their eyes sharp, their phones out. Inside, the kids practiced as usual, but Harris felt the weight pressing heavier than the basketballs in their hands. Marcus leaned against the wall, scanning the windows. "They're circling, David. I can feel it." "I know," Harris said calmly. "Let the kids finish, then we'll walk them out together." When practice ended, Harris led the children out the side door, his calm presence steady as a shield. Parents hurried them into cars, their eyes darting nervously at the street. Then it happened. A bottle smashed against the pavement near the entrance, sending glass scattering. Shouts erupted from across the street, gang members emboldened by numbers, jeering, chanting his name like a curse. The children screamed, clinging to their parents. Officers stationed nearby rushed forward, but the mob surged louder, their anger boiling over. Marcus moved instinctively, stepping in front of Harris. "It's a setup," he hissed. "They want you to crack." Harris's voice was steady. "Then we won't." He stepped forward, hands open, posture calm. The gang leaders sneered, their voices carrying across the calle. You think you're untouchable, Colonel? You think calm makes you a god? Tonight, you fall. Harris's reply was quiet, but it cut through the noise. No, tonight you prove yourselves wrong. Phones were already streaming. The city, the country, the world. Everyone was watching again. And the storm, once only whispered in dark basements, had broken into full view. The glass still shimmered on the pavement when the crowd across the street surged forward. Their chants twisted into curses, voices sharp with rage. Cars idled with engines rumbling, ready to bolt if things spun out of control. Colonel Harris stood steady, the weight of dozens of phones trained on him. Children clung to their parents, some crying, others frozen. Marcus hovered near his shoulder, tense like a coiled spring. David, Marcus muttered, they're trying to bait you. One wrong move and they'll have exactly what they want. I know, Harris replied calmly, his voice carried, unshaken. That's why we won't give it to them. One of the gang leaders stepped out from the mob, swagger in every step, eyes burning with pride. Look at him, he shouted to the crowd. The great colonel, hiding behind kids and cameras. Let's see how calm he is when we're in his face. He lunged forward, stopping just short of Harris. The crowd roared, shoving phones higher, hungry for violence. But Harris didn't move. He didn't flinch. His hands stayed open, palms visible. His voice was quiet, but the microphones caught it. You call this strength? Hiding in numbers, throwing bottles near children? The leader sneered. Strength is fear, and you'll fear us tonight. Harris's gaze sharpened. No, fear belongs to you. That's why you shout. That's why you strike. Because you know calm has already beaten you. Murmurs rippled through the bystanders, even some among the gang shifting uneasily. Then chaos erupted. A second bottle flew, this time striking the hood of a parked car. Someone shoved. A scream pierced the night. Police rushed forward, batons raised, but the mob pressed harder, pride outweighing caution. Marcus grabbed Harris's arm. We have to get the kids out of here, now! Harris nodded. Together they moved parents and children toward waiting cars, forming a shield with their own bodies. Naomi clutched her father's hand, tears streaking her face. Colonel, don't leave us! Harris crouched briefly, his hand steady on her shoulder. I won't. You'll be safe. Calm, Naomi. Remember. Calm. The gang leaders pushed closer, fury boiling. One raised a chain, swinging it wildly toward Harris. The metal clattered off the pavement inches from his feet. Gasps rippled through the crowd, phones trembling in hands. Still, Harris didn't strike back. He stepped forward instead, his voice cutting sharp. You think the city will respect this? You think children will look at you and see power? No. They'll see fear pretending to be pride, and they'll see calm defeating you without a single fist. The chain dropped from the man's grip, his bravado faltering. The crowd's roar softened into a wave of whispers. Police finally pushed the mob back, sirens wailing, blue lights flashing across the square. Several gang members were wrestled to the ground, hands cuffed behind their backs. Others bolted into the night, their courage evaporating with the arrival of force. Through it all, Harris stood still, posture unbroken. Cameras zoomed in, broadcasting his composure to millions. Marcus exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. You didn't just hold your ground. You turned their attack into their own defeat. Harris shook his head. No, pride defeated them. Calm only revealed it. Across the city, televisions lit up living rooms as live footage streamed. Anchors narrated in disbelief. We're witnessing Colonel David Harris face down an organized mob without lifting a hand. He remains unshaken even as violence erupts around him. On social media, hashtags exploded. #TheCalmStands and #RespectHarris. But critics fired back too. He's destabilizing authority. One man shouldn't hold this kind of sway. The nation divided deeper, yet the image was undeniable. Harris, unflinching while chaos broke around him. Later that night, after the streets cleared, Harris sat alone at his desk, notebook open. The pen scratched across the page. They struck tonight. Pride gathered numbers, fear threw bottles, anger swung chains. But calm did not move, and calm prevailed. Not because I am stronger, not because I am fearless, but because calm reveals the truth. Noise destroys itself. He paused, staring at the ink glistening under the lamp. But each time I stand, the storm grows larger. They will return louder, angrier. And one day, they may not stop at bottles. The cost of calm rises. Am I ready to pay it? He closed the notebook, exhaling slowly. By dawn, Norfolk was buzzing again, though this time not with chance, but with disbelief. Phones across the city replayed the same shaky videos. Bottles shattering, children screaming, a chain swinging toward Colonel Harris, and Harris standing calm through it all. News anchors framed the night in stark terms. A mob tried to break the calm. Instead, they broke themselves. Commentators dissected every angle. Some praised Harris for saving children from chaos without lifting a fist. Others warned that the city was sliding into dangerous hero worship, but no one could deny what the footage showed. Harris had stood where others cracked. At the rec center, parents arrived early, their faces tight with gratitude and worry. Naomi clung to Harris as soon as she saw him. "You didn't leave us," she whispered. "I promised you, didn't I?" Harris replied, steady as ever. Her father gripped Harris's hand firmly. "You shielded our kids with nothing but your presence. I'll never forget it." Harris nodded, though his eyes carried the weight of the storm. "I only did what discipline demands. Calm isn't for show, it's for survival." The parents exchanged looks. For them, Harris was more than calm. He was safety. Across town, however, in the precinct, bitterness deepened. Officers gathered in tense silence as the captain addressed them. "What happened last night proves we're losing control," he said grimly. "Crowds listen to him, not us. That can't continue." One officer muttered, "Maybe if we earned respect the way he does." The captain cut him off sharply. "Respect doesn't matter if order collapses. We are the law, not Harris, not a crowd with candles." The room split again, some nodding with anger, others glancing at the floor in shame. And in a quiet corner, the disgraced officer listened, a faint smile tugging at his lips. His plan had failed, but Harris's growing influence only stoked his resolve. Meanwhile, in Washington, lawmakers seized the moment. A senator thundered on the floor, one man standing calm while chaos surrounded him. That is what leadership looks like. Another countered, "No one man should hold a city's peace in his hands. This is dangerous, and it undermines trust in our institutions." The debate grew louder, spilling onto every screen, every feed. Harris's name had become shorthand for a nation wrestling with pride and restraint. Marcus watched it all with weary eyes. Sitting across from Harris at the kitchen table, he shook his head. "You know what they're saying now? That you're not just Norfolk's calm, you're America's calm." Harris set down his coffee, gaze steady. "That's their story, not mine. But their story's louder than yours," Marcus warned. "And louder stories crush quieter truths." Harris opened his notebook, writing slowly as he spoke. "Then I'll keep writing, even if the world doesn't listen. Because calm doesn't need to be loud. It only needs to endure." That evening, downtown Norfolk lit up again. Thousands poured into the square, candles glowing in trembling hands. Veterans stood at attention, saluting silently. Families held photos of loved ones lost to chaos. Children carried handmade signs that read, "Respect is calm." Reporters narrated breathlessly, "This city has transformed into a stage." Tonight, Norfolk chants not for war, but for peace. But across the barricades, counter-protesters shouted louder than ever, "No idols, no myths. Harris divides us." Police lines strained, tension humming like a live wire. And then Harris appeared. He hadn't planned to, but when he heard chants outside his window, he knew silence would let the noise decide the story. So he walked into the square, calm as ever, his posture steady, his eyes unshaken. The crowd erupted, but he raised a hand. Silence rippled outward. "I am not your savior," he said, voice carrying into the night. "I am not your enemy. I am a man who chose calm when anger demanded fear. That is all. Don't worship me. Don't curse me. Learn from me." He gestured toward the children near the front, their candles flickering in small hands. "Look at them. They don't need chants. They need examples. Choose calm. For them." For a heartbeat, the noise softened. Even the counter-protesters faltered, their shouts shrinking against the weight of his words. Later that night, Harris returned home exhausted. He opened his notebook, pen steady. Tonight they lifted candles instead of fists. For a moment, calm spread. But moments are fragile. The storm hasn't passed. It only waits. And each time I stand, the weight grows heavier. But I will not bow, because calm is not mine alone. It belongs to all who choose it. He underlined the final line twice. Outside, the chants had faded, replaced by a quiet Norfolk hadn't known in weeks. But in shadows and basements, pride still plotted, humiliated and desperate to strike again. The storm would return, and Colonel David Harris would be waiting, calm as ever. By the time the weekend arrived, Norfolk felt like a city under siege, not from gangs or soldiers, but from its own reputation. National reporters filled every hotel, their satellite vans choking narrow streets. Every mural painted with a trident or Harris's face became a tourist attraction. Protesters rotated shifts, keeping their chants alive day and night. The city council convened an emergency session. One member pounded the table. Norfolk cannot be defined by one man. We need to restore order, not feed this myth. Another shot back. Order collapsed when that officer slammed a colonel onto his car. Harris didn't ask to be a symbol. The people made him one. The debate raged, echoing the same split that rippled through the streets. At the rec center, Harris tried to keep life steady for the children. Basketballs still bounced, sneakers still squeaked, but he could feel the weight pressing heavier each day. Parents lingered longer at drop-off, whispering about new threats, about crowds swelling bigger, about whether Norfolk was safe at all. Naomi approached him after practice, her eyes wide. "Colonel, my teacher said you're famous now, like on TV everywhere." Harris crouched to meet her gaze. "Fame isn't strength, Naomi. It's noise. Don't let noise distract you from truth." She frowned. "What's the truth?" "That calm is stronger than anger, always." She nodded slowly, but he could see how difficult it was for a child to separate the man from the myth. Meanwhile, in Washington, lawmakers pressed harder. A new resolution circulated in committee, calling for Harris to return for further testimony. One senator demanded, "If this man is going to influence public order across the nation, we must know exactly where he stands." On the opposite side, veterans groups flooded congressional offices with letters. "Colonel Harris saved our brothers overseas. He represents discipline, not defiance. Stop dragging him through political fire." The debate spilled into evening broadcasts, each side twisting Harris's calm into ammunition. Marcus watched it unfold with mounting frustration. Sitting across from Harris at the kitchen table, he jabbed a finger at the television. "They're turning you into a weapon. Both sides. You know what happens to weapons, David? They get used until they break." Harris closed his notebook, his voice even. "Then I won't let them use me. Calm isn't a weapon, it's a choice. And choices can't be taken, only given." Marcus shook his head. "You really think that'll stop them?" "It will stop me from losing myself," Harris said. But beyond the calm words, danger grew sharper. The disgraced officer met again with the gang leaders, pride burning in every glance. "He made fools of us in front of the world," one growled. "And now the world bows to him." The officer's jaw clenched. "Then we don't just attack him, we attack his calm. We prove it's fragile. We make the city watch him crack." Their plan deepened. No longer a chaotic ambush, but something calculated, public, meant to erase the image of Harris as unshakable. Back in Norfolk, protests swelled again. Veterans held banners high, chanting Harris's name. Counter-protesters shouted louder, accusing him of undermining the badge. Police lines strained, their faces grim, their loyalties torn between duty and quiet respect. In the middle of it all, Harris appeared once more. The chants spiked, the cameras zoomed, but his presence shifted the air. He raised his hand and the roar dimmed. "I am not your leader," he said firmly. "I am not your enemy. I am a man who chose calm when pride demanded rage. That is all. If you want peace, stop shouting my name. Start choosing calm in your own lives." For a moment, silence stretched across the square, heavy but healing. That night, Harris returned home and opened his notebook. The pen moved slowly, deliberately. "They chant my name louder each day. They call me hero. They call me danger. Neither is true. Calm does not belong to me. It belongs to anyone who chooses it. But pride cannot accept that. Pride demands noise, demands conflict, and pride will strike again." He paused, staring at the page. "When it does, I must remain the same. Because the storm only wins if calm bends." He underlined the last sentence twice, then closed the notebook with a steady breath. Outside, Norfolk seemed to sleep, but only on the surface. In dark corners and hidden rooms, plans sharpened. The gangs and the officer prepared their strike, convinced that breaking Harris in public would shatter the myth once and for all. And though Harris didn't know the details yet, he felt it in his bones. The storm was circling back. The only question left was whether the city would stand with calm or collapse under noise. Norfolk's Saturday afternoon should have been ordinary. Families filled the farmers' market, vendors called out prices for peaches and corn, and children tugged at their parents' sleeves for ice cream. But beneath the hum of chatter, tension buzzed like electricity. Too many unfamiliar faces lingered at corners. Too many phones pointed in Harris's direction as he walked calmly through the crowd. Marcus noticed it first. "They're here," he muttered, eyes scanning the edges. "Not just reporters. Look at the way those guys move. This isn't curiosity, it's staging." Harris adjusted the bag of groceries in his hand, his posture unshaken. "Then they'll get the same answer as always. Calm," Marcus swore under his breath. "One of these days, calm won't be enough." At the far end of the square, the disgraced officer stepped from a car flanked by gang leaders in hoodies. Cameras swung instantly, reporters sensing drama. The officer didn't hide. He wanted this moment public. He raised his voice loud enough for the microphones to catch. "There he is, the so-called calm, hiding behind kids and veterans." Heads turned, shoppers froze, phones lifted higher. The officer marched closer, sneer stretched wide. "You made me a villain, Colonel. You turned this city against its own. Now let's see if your calm saves you when the whole world's watching." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some shouted back at him. Others urged Harris to leave. But Harris didn't move. "I didn't make you a villain," Harris said, voice level. "Pride did. And pride is destroying you now." The words cut, but the officer only laughed bitterly. "Let's see how calm you are when chaos comes." He snapped his fingers. Suddenly the square erupted. Gang members surged from alleys, shouting, pushing through stalls, knocking over tables of produce. Shoppers screamed, scattering. Vendors ducked for cover. The once peaceful market became a storm of panic. Marcus stepped forward instinctively, fists clenched. "David!" But Harris raised a hand, steady. "No fists! Discipline!" He stepped into the chaos, his voice carrying like thunder. "Enough!" The single word rippled through the mob. Some hesitated, caught off guard by his composure, but others pressed harder, shoving through the crowd toward him. One gang leader swung a metal pipe. Harris sidestepped, letting it clatter against the pavement. Another lunged, but Harris turned, redirecting the motion so the man stumbled past. Each move was precise, efficient, but never violent. Phones captured everything. Live streams exploded online. "The calm under attack!" trended within minutes. The officer shouted above the noise, desperate to provoke him. "Fight back! Show them you're just like us!" Harris's eyes locked on him. "That's what you want. Proof that calm can break, but it won't. Not tonight. Not ever." Police sirens wailed as cruisers screeched into the square. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, caught between protecting civilians and their resentment toward Harris. The crowd roared louder, torn between cheering him and cursing the chaos he seemed to draw. Marcus grabbed Harris's arm. "You're standing in a trap, brother. They wanted this. Cameras, chaos, the whole city watching." "I know," Harris said calmly. "That's why I must stand." An officer rushed forward, baton raised toward Harris instead of the mob. Gasps erupted, but before the strike could fall, a group of veterans, men who had served under Harris overseas, stepped between them. Their voices rang out together. "Stand down! That's our colonel!" The officer froze, shame flashing across his face as cameras captured the moment. The veterans saluted, their formation steady even in the storm. The crowd hushed, stunned by the sudden wall of respect. The gangs faltered, their pride cracking under the weight of discipline they couldn't match. Some dropped their weapons and melted back into alleys. Others were dragged down by police, the cuffs clicking loud in the chaos. And through it all, Harris stood unshaken, his presence like bedrock. When the last shouts faded and the last cruiser pulled away, the square lay in ruins, stalls overturned, glass shattered, fruit crushed into the pavement. But no blood spilled. No fists traded. Only calm endured. That night, Harris sat at his desk, notebook open. His pen moved slowly, each word deliberate. They planned tonight. Pride set the stage. Fear pulled the strings. They struck with numbers, with noise, with chaos. And still, calm stood. Not with fists, not with rage, with discipline. And once again, noise destroyed itself. He paused, pressing the pen harder, but each trap grows larger, each test heavier. The day will come when they strike not at me, but at those I protect. And when that day comes, calm will be harder than ever. He closed the book, exhaling deeply. Outside, Norfolk seemed to sleep. But Harris knew better. Pride never sleeps. And the storm was far from over. By morning, the footage of the market chaos had already swept across the nation. News channels played the clips in endless rotation. The pipe swinging past Harris, the veterans forming a shield, the officer hesitating with his baton. Commentators debated in raised voices. One anchor declared, "Colonel Harris once again stood against violence without raising a fist. This is leadership." Another countered, "No, this is destabilization." Crowds chant his name, gangs challenge him directly, and police hesitate. One man has become bigger than the system itself. The divide deepened, every screen feeding the storm. In Norfolk, the rec center filled with families shaken from the night before. Parents thanked Harris in hushed voices, some near tears. Naomi clung to him, whispering, "I saw you on my phone. You didn't even fight back." He crouched to meet her gaze. Because fighting back with fists doesn't win. Control wins. Always. "But what if they don't stop?" she asked. "Then I still won't break," Harris said firmly. Calm isn't about stopping storms, it's about standing through them. At City Hall, the council chambers buzzed with panic. Leaders argued whether to honor Harris or to rein him in. "He saved that square from bloodshed," one councilwoman insisted. A rival shot back, and in doing so, he showed the public that police can't handle it without him. That undermines every badge in this city. The room erupted, the city's leaders as divided as its people. Meanwhile, in Washington, senators seized the story for their own battles. One waved a printout of the footage, declaring, "Discipline like this is what America needs. Calm under pressure, dignity in the face of chaos." Another warned, "When mobs chant a man's name instead of respecting the law, we tread dangerous ground." Harris may mean well, but myths like this corrode institutions. The Capitol echoed Norfolk's turmoil, the debate twisting Harris's truth into political ammunition. Back in Norfolk, Marcus slammed a newspaper onto Harris's table. The headline screamed, "The calm saves market from riot, but at what cost?" "You see this?" Marcus said. "They make you sound like some saint or some saboteur. Nobody's listening to your words anymore. They're listening to their own noise about you." Harris closed his notebook, his voice steady. "Then I'll keep writing, even if no one reads. Calm isn't for crowds, it's for me, and if I don't hold it, I lose myself." Marcus leaned closer, frustrated. "David, you've become the center of a war between pride and peace, and they won't stop until one side breaks you." Harris met his gaze. "Then I will not be the one who breaks." But in the shadows of Norfolk, the gangs and the disgraced officer plotted again. Last night had rattled them. Harris hadn't cracked, and the veteran's shield had humiliated them further. One leader spat angrily. "We threw everything at him, and he stood like a wall. People are laughing at us." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Then we changed the game. We don't go at him directly. We go at what he protects. We make him choose between his calm and their safety." The others leaned in, pride and desperation mixing into something dangerous. Their next plan would not be about fists or bottles. It would be about breaking Harris where it hurt most. That evening, Harris walked through downtown, murals of his face glowing under streetlights. Some passers-by saluted him. Others scowled, muttering curses. A woman approached, clutching her child's hand. "Colonel, thank you for saving the market. My son slept safe because of you." Harris gave a small nod. "I only did what discipline required." The boy looked up wide-eyed. "Are you a superhero?" Harris knelt, smiling faintly. "No, I'm a man who doesn't let storms control him, and you can be that too." The child nodded solemnly, as if handed a secret. Later, back home, Harris opened his notebook once more. "They threw chaos at me, and calm endured. But I see their eyes. Anger hasn't left them. Pride doesn't fade. It festers. They will return, not with bottles or pipes, but with something sharper, something meant to cut deeper. And when they do, I must stand the same. Because calm is not victory. Calm is survival. And survival is strength enough." He underlined the last sentence firmly. Norfolk slept uneasily that night. Supporters lit candles at vigils. Critics shouted louder online. And in hidden rooms, plans hardened into action. The storm was circling back again, darker than before. And Harris knew it. The next strike wouldn't test his fists. It would test his soul. The next morning, Norfolk's air was heavy with rumors. Market vendors whispered about gangs gathering again. Parents at the rec center exchanged nervous looks, scanning the parking lot twice before leaving their children. The sense of safety Harris had built seemed fragile, threatened by whispers of another strike. Marcus stormed into Harris's kitchen, slamming the newspaper down. "They're not going after you this time, David. They're going after the people around you." Harris looked up calmly from his notebook. That was always the next step. Marcus leaned in, fists clenched. "You don't get it. They want to prove your calm can't protect anyone else. If they hit the kids, the parents, the veterans, they think you'll crack." Harris closed the notebook softly. "Then I must stand firmer than ever, because if I break, they win twice." That afternoon, practice at the rec center felt different. The children bounced basketballs, but their eyes darted toward the windows. Naomi whispered, "Coach, why are there men outside again?" Harris walked to the glass. Across the street, unfamiliar faces lingered, hoods up, hands in pockets, staring too long. He turned back to the children, his voice calm. "Eyes here. The game doesn't change because someone watches. Focus on your play. Control what you can." The kids nodded, steadied by his tone, though their fear still flickered. Marcus, leaning against the wall, muttered, "They're baiting you. They want panic inside these walls." "Then we won't give it to them," Harris replied. But that night, the gangs made their move. A brick crashed through one of the rec center's windows, shattering glass across the gym floor. The children screamed, dropping balls, parents rushing to shield them. Harris raised his voice, firm and steady. "Everyone out the side door, calmly. No running. Stay together." His composure cut through the panic, guiding them like a lighthouse. Within minutes, every child was safely outside, huddled near waiting cars. Marcus swore under his breath, scanning the street. "They're not stopping. Look." Across the lot, gang members jeered, their shouts echoing. One waved a can of spray paint, scrawling over the mural of Harris with words, "Calm breaks." The officer who had once humiliated Harris stepped forward, shouting across the lot, "See that? Your calm doesn't protect them. You can't stop us." Harris met his gaze, voice steady but cold. "You mistake calm for surrender. It's not. Calm is control, and control is stronger than fear." Police sirens wailed in the distance, but the gangs scattered before they arrived, their message left behind in broken glass and mocking graffiti. Parents comforted their children, some demanding the rec center shut down. "We can't risk our kids," one mother cried. "They're making him a target and us with him." Another parent shook his head. "He saved them tonight. Without him, who knows what would have happened?" The divide mirrored the city itself, some seeing Harris as salvation, others as the reason chaos had arrived at their doorstep. That evening, Harris and Marcus sat in the dim light of the kitchen. Marcus's frustration boiled over. "David, they're not just after you anymore. They're dragging kids into this war. At some point, calm won't be enough. At some point, you'll have to fight back." Harris set his pen down, eyes steady. "No, Marcus. The moment I fight back with fists, I lose everything. Calm doesn't break. It doesn't lash out. It endures." Marcus slammed his palm on the table. "Endures until when? Until someone gets hurt? Until Naomi doesn't walk out of here safe?" Harris's voice was low but unshakable. "Until the storm sees itself for what it is. Chaos collapses on its own. Pride always devours itself." Across the city, in a warehouse filled with shadows, the disgraced officer seethed with the gang leaders. "He didn't crack," one spat. "We broke his window, we terrified his kids, and he still stood calm." The officer's face twisted. "Then we hit harder, bigger. We take his calm and turn it against him. If he won't fight, we'll make the city think he's weak. And weakness destroys myths." The leaders nodded, already planning. The next strike wouldn't be just vandalism, it would be spectacle, something so loud the whole country would watch. Late that night, Harris opened his notebook, glass from the shattered window still crunching under his boots. His hand moved slowly across the page. "They struck at the children tonight. They broke glass, they shouted, they painted walls, but they did not break calm. Calm led them out safely. Calm stood when fear wanted to scatter, yet the cost grows heavier. Parents doubt, children tremble, and the storm feeds on that fear." He paused, staring at the ink. "The storm wants proof I cannot protect. They will come again, larger, louder. But calm is not about winning every battle. Calm is about never surrendering to pride. And that I will not do." He closed the book firmly. Outside, the city seemed to sleep, but in its alleys and warehouses, pride sharpened its blade for the next strike, and Harris knew the battle ahead would test calm like never before. The night of the planned rally arrived like a storm waiting to break. Norfolk's downtown square, once home to candlelight vigils and chants for peace, now brimmed with tension. Thousands gathered, supporters clutching flags and banners with the word "calm" painted bold, counter-protesters shouting into megaphones, police wedged between them with faces taut. News vans lined the streets, satellite dishes pointed skyward. Anchors rehearsed their lines, their voices trembling with anticipation. They knew what everyone knew. Something was going to happen tonight. And at the heart of it all, Colonel David Harris walked with steady steps, his posture upright, his eyes calm. He had refused security, refused fanfare. "If I can't stand among them, I have no business speaking to them," he had told Marcus. Marcus now shadowed his flank, muttering, "This doesn't feel right. Too many whispers, too many faces we don't know." "I know," Harris replied. "That's why I came." At the edge of the square, the disgraced officer watched from the shadows, flanked by gang leaders. Their plan was simple but devastating. Spark chaos so violent that Harris's calm would look like cowardice. Break him in front of cameras. Shatter the myth. "Wait until he speaks," the officer muttered. "Then we light the fire." The gang leaders grinned, weapons hidden beneath their jackets, adrenaline burning in their veins. Harris stepped onto the courthouse steps, the noise crashing over him like waves. Chants rose. "Respect the colonel," colliding with jeers of "no man above the law." The police line strained, ready to snap. He raised his hand and the noise dipped, like the tide receding before a storm. "I am not your hero," he began, voice clear, strong. "I am not your enemy. I am a man who chose calm when anger demanded rage. That is all. If you chant my name, stop. If you curse my name, stop. Look not at me, look at yourselves." Some fell silent, others murmured, torn between pride and respect. Cameras zoomed closer, capturing every crease of his uniform, every line of his face. And then, it happened. A firecracker exploded near the crowd, followed by the crash of glass. Screams tore through the air. Gang members surged from alleys, shoving people, waving pipes, setting off smoke bombs. Panic rippled like lightning. The officer's voice rang out, dripping with venom. "Where's your calm now, Colonel? Protect them!" Cameras swung wildly, live streams exploding online. Marcus shouted, "David, they're forcing your hand!" But Harris stood still, eyes scanning the chaos. Parents shielded children, police flailed to contain the surge, fists flew in the smoke. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Stop!" The word struck like a hammer. For a moment, even the gangs hesitated, stunned by the force behind it. "You came for me," Harris said, projecting his voice, "but you struck at them. Children, families, neighbors. That's not strength. That's cowardice dressed as pride." One gang leader swung a pipe, aiming for Harris's chest. Harris shifted slightly, redirecting the momentum so the man stumbled to the ground. Another lunged, but Harris sidestepped, his calm movements sharp and deliberate, turning fury into emptiness. Phones captured every second, the colonel standing unflinching while chaos whirled around him. The officer shouted, desperate, "Fight him! Break him!" But the gangs faltered. Their strikes landed on nothing but air, their noise drowned by Harris's presence. And then, veterans in the crowd surged forward, forming a line before Harris. They raised their hands in salute, voices ringing out together. "Stand down! That's our colonel!" The sight cracked the mob. Pride turned to doubt, doubt to fear. Some gang members fled into alleys. Others were dragged down by police, sirens wailing, cuffs clinking. When the smoke cleared, the square was wrecked. Glass shattered, banners torn, fear hanging heavy. But no blood stained the pavement. Harris stood at the center, calm as ever, surrounded by veterans and children clutching their parents' hands. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions. "How did you stop them? What kept you from fighting back?" "What now, Colonel?" Harris answered with the same composure that had carried him through every storm. "Calm is not weakness, calm is control, and control will always outlast chaos." That night, back home, he opened his notebook. His hand trembled slightly, but his words were steady. They struck tonight with fire and smoke, with fists and fear. They wanted to see calm break, but calm did not break. Calm endured. Yet each test grows heavier, each storm louder. The city cheers, the city curses, but neither knows the cost. The cost is weight on my shoulders, heavier each day. Still, I will carry it, because calm does not belong to me. It belongs to everyone who chooses it. He underlined the final sentence, closed the book, and exhaled slowly. Outside, Norfolk still hummed with the echoes of violence, and Harris knew the storm's final test was yet to come. The morning after the courthouse riot, Norfolk felt like a city standing on a knife's edge. Storefronts still bore shattered glass, smoke clung faintly to the air, and murals of Harris were now smeared with graffiti. Some read, "The calm saves." Others were crossed out with the words, "Calm breaks." Every news outlet replayed the footage. Harris standing firm while gangs surged, veterans saluting as chaos bent. To some, he was a hero who embodied discipline. To others, he was a threat, proof that one man's presence overshadowed the institutions meant to uphold order. But in dark corners of the city, the disgraced officer seethed. Last night was supposed to be Harris's undoing, yet the colonel had walked out stronger than before. Rage boiled into obsession. "If calm won't break in chaos," he muttered to his allies, "then we break him in silence." The gang leaders leaned in, pride wounded. "One last strike, bigger, final. If we can't tear him down with fists, we'll tear him down with fear." The plan was set. That evening, Harris sat at the rec center, notebook open. Children's voices still echoed faintly in the halls, though practice had ended hours earlier. Marcus paced nearby, tension carved into every line of his face. "You feel it, don't you?" Marcus asked. "They're not done. They're planning something worse." Harris didn't look up from his writing. The storm does not end when the sky clears. It hides, waits, and gathers strength. "Yes," he said finally, "I feel it, and I'll be ready." Marcus slammed his palm on the table. "Ready how? You can't just keep standing there, David. They'll come harder, and this time they'll aim past you. Kids, families." Harris closed the notebook gently. "Then I will stand harder. Calm doesn't mean unprepared, Marcus. It means unbroken." The final strike came sooner than expected. Saturday evening, as families gathered at the square for a candlelight vigil, black SUVs rolled up. Gang members poured out, faces masked, bats and chains glinting under the streetlights. The crowd gasped, candles flickering in trembling hands. At the center, Harris stepped forward, posture steady. The disgraced officer emerged behind the mob, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you're untouchable, Colonel? Tonight, calm dies." Phones lifted instantly, live streams flooding across the internet. The world was watching again. The gang surged, shoving through the crowd. Screams erupted as parents clutched children. Veterans formed a protective wall, saluting once more, but the mob pressed harder, fueled by desperation. Harris raised his voice, sharp and commanding. "Stop!" The word cut through the square like thunder. The mob hesitated, caught by his tone. Harris stepped forward, eyes fixed on the officer. "You've mistaken calm for weakness," Harris said. "You think pride makes you strong, but pride has destroyed you. Look at yourself, hiding behind gangs, behind chaos, while discipline stands unshaken." The officer's face twisted. He lunged, shoving Harris with both hands. Cameras caught it from every angle. Harris didn't move. His stance was rooted like stone. "No," Harris said, voice cold and steady. "Calm does not fall." The crowd roared, not with violence but with defiance. Supporters surged forward, not to fight but to stand. Veterans raised their hands in salute. Parents lifted candles higher. Even some officers in the police line lowered their batons, shame flashing in their eyes. The gangs faltered. Their numbers looked small against a square full of people who refused to be broken. Pride cracked under the weight of unity. Some dropped weapons and fled. Others froze as police finally advanced, cuffing them in front of roaring cameras. And at the center, the disgraced officer stood trembling, his rage collapsing into silence. "You lost the moment you chose pride," Harris said quietly. "Calm wins because calm endures." When it was over, the square was filled not with chaos, but with the glow of candles unshaken. Reporters narrated breathlessly, "The colonel has stood calm again, turning a mob into silence without a single blow." For the first time in weeks, Norfolk exhaled. Later that night, Harris sat at his desk, notebook open one last time. They struck with everything: fear, chaos, violence. They tried to break calm by turning the city against itself, but calm did not break. Calm spread. Parents stood. Veterans stood. Even children stood. And in their stand, pride collapsed. He paused, underlining the words, "Calm is not mine. Calm belongs to all who choose it. And tonight, they chose it with me." Closing the notebook, Harris felt the weight lift from his shoulders. The storm had not vanished forever. Storms never do, but for tonight, Norfolk was calm. And justice at last had found its place.